Everyone, and welcome back. I apologize for the brief hiatus in videos. I was on spring break, so that's why I wasn't posting. Going forward, I'm hoping to be a lot more consistent with posting videos. Um, but today, I just wanted to talk about a concept that I've been racking my brain around recently, which has really been inspired by a class that I'm taking here at Harvard with Professor Danielle Allen. She is a really renowned professor in the political science field, particularly her insights on democratic governance. And I'm taking her class entitled Justice by Means of Democracy, and it's modeled after her book, which she published entitled with the same name, which I would recommend reading for sure. I think she has some very valuable insights on the future. But I just wanted to hone in on a particular concept that we talked about in class and that we have seen from many sources and that I have actually found myself agreeing with. And that is the concept of political paradigms and how right now we're living through a shift in political paradigms away from neoliberalism into something else. It remains to be seen what exactly the future will look like. We're still definitely in the transitionary phase of paradigms, and she's definitely arguing that we're living in a transition away from neoliberalism, and I think I have to agree with her. And this analysis actually makes the current political moment make so much more sense, because it it kind of showcases how fundamental ideas of the political space are all under contest right now. It feels like even fundamentally held ideas that we used to agree about historically, even both parties in the past 50 or so years, there's starting to be disagreements on even issues of national security where there used to be kind of uniform agreement between the parties. It just seems like there's so everything's being contested by both sides of the political spectrum now. There is no longer a narrowing of kind of what political discourse is or what parties individually deal with or focus on. And so, before we kind of go further, I think it's important to have a base understanding of what exactly neoliberalism is or what I mean by it, because there are a lot of definitions. I found a couple definitions. Actually, I really like the definition from Investopedia, that neoliberalism is a political and economic philosophy that emphasizes free trade, deregulation, globalization, and a reduction in government spending. I really like that definition. I would also add, especially in the context of America and the West, I think there has been kind of a foreign policy aspect with neoliberalism as well, which is kind of upholding the liberal world order led by the West and the kind of liberal policies and social policies and norms that the United States and Europe tends to abide by and trying to expand those norms across the globe. Additionally, another definition from the Hewlett Foundation, which does have a particular opinion on neoliberalism, that neoliberalism is the free market, anti government, growth at all costs approach to economic and social policy. And they continue that it has dominated policy debates in the United States and much of the world for the last half century. It then goes on, which this is where it's clear opinion on neoliberalism is showcased, where it says it has outlived whatever usefulness it once had, and to today it creates more problem than it solves, from skyrocketing wealth inequality to climate crisis to systemic racism. Um, and this is kind of a topic that we'll touch on a little bit later as well, is there's a reason why we're shifting away from neoliberalism, and that is because so many people feel discontent with the current system, that our system just isn't working, and so people are searching for something different. And neoliberalism has precipitated a lot of issues, particularly wealth inequality. Um, so that's kind of the model that the US has followed for the past multiple decades. Both parties, Reagan followed neoliberalism, Clinton followed neoliberalism, Obama did, Bush did. Across the political spectrum, there is a set agreement on a certain set of ideals, such as free trade, deregulation, and globalization. But what we'll see is that we're perhaps going through a shift in the political paradigm, which may seem a little incomprehensible considering, at least for me, because this is kind of the political paradigm that I've lived in my entire life. So it's hard for me to reimagine something else. But this is something that does happen fairly regularly. Here's a chart from an article entitled Shrinking Capitalism Components of a New Political Economy Paradigm by Samuel Bowles and Wendy Carlin. It was published in the Oxford Review of Economic Policy, I believe, in 2001. And this is a very insightful chart, kind of going through different paradigms throughout the past, 120 years. And perhaps it also gives more insight into what exactly a paradigm is. And so it shows kind of the classical liberal paradigm, anti-tariff, anti-monopoly kind of, or emblematic policies. This is like the early 1900s, kind of Teddy Roosevelt policies. Then we moved to kind of social democratic policies under FDR's kind of where that shift happened, all the way through, late 60s, early 70s ish. I would say actually 70s, early 70s, mid 70s is a better time frame for when this kind of dominated. This is like FDR New Deal politics, security, fairness, shared affluence. This is why we created, the Social Security Administration, Medicare, Medicaid, all of these things. And then after that, kind of came the neoliberal order, which like kind of emphasized school vouchers, privatization, the government that governs best governs least, those kind of policies. And then it does say new paradigm, which I will put kind of a caveat of like, obviously the new paradigm has not come yet. We're in the middle of a transitionary period, so it's unclear what exactly it'll look like. Right now, it does seem that the Republican Party is winning, the battle. I don't know if they're winning the war. There's still this fight will play out for over a decade, which is a lifetime in politics. And so who knows kind of where the future of our political paradigms will go exactly. There's going to be a lot of fights about this and discourse and changes and positions as we go through this shift. So this is just something what it could look like. Arguably one from my perspective, which would be good. Social relations, free from domination, equal dignity and voice, sustainability, real freedom for all, cooperation, good morals. These kind of principles are what a new paradigm could look like going into the future. But essentially the argument I'm trying to make is it does appear that there is a shift, and there's a different chart from the same article that kind of talks about different problems and reasons for eventual failure for all of these paradigms. Again, kind of what I said, the classical liberal paradigm ended because of the Great Depression and rise of fascism. The end of kind of the New Deal policies were because of stagflation, state fatigue, those types of things. Now we're seeing kind of the failures of neoliberalism, growing inequality, climate emergency, threat of authoritarian statist populism. So we're kind of seeing this collapse of this dominating paradigm, which is very fascinating and a little daunting, because the last time that a shift like this happened was the mid 70s, which was quite a while ago. We've been living under the neoliberal paradigm for a while. And Trump has definitely represented a shift from that, which we'll go into more later. There's even a couple more articles. Here's from Ross Douthat, who wrote an opinion column in the New York Times after the 2024 election, and he states, "We are not going back. We are not returning to the narrowing of political debate that characterized the world after 1989, the converging worldviews of the Reaganite center-right and the Clinton-Blairite center-left." And he continues that the post-Cold War era has ended and we're not going back. And he also goes into kind of what I was just talking about how this Trump era does represent a shift from the neoliberal paradigm, but the future is still open and it's uncertain, and it is not guaranteed that this kind of Trump vision of the world will become the new dominating paradigm. there will be a pushback from the left on this paradigm once the left finally gets its footing going into the future, which it's very frustrating right now. It feels very frustrating as someone on the left about how the Democratic Party is addressing this current situation, because it doesn't feel like they are. But I do think, eventually footing will be found, hopefully sooner rather than later. Trump has only been in office in a couple months, even though it feels like longer. So there's still a lot of time for Democrats to get their footing on what kind of their position on the future political paradigm is and why it's different from the neoliberal order, because the Democrats have been sticking more towards the neoliberal order. Biden did, these old school politicians. But that's not really what the voters want. They want to change. They're angry with the current system, the way government works. So the future is open, and this is our chance to seize it. That's part of the reason why I actually created this channel, is because this is a very ripe political moment for change. As we go through just this transitionary period, this is a moment where everyone is seeking solutions and new answers to fundamental questions about governments and the world order. And so the left needs to retake the narrative on what the future looks like, because Trump has been very good at dominating the kind of the airwaves, just dominating the whole dialogue on this subject about what he views the world as and the changes that he wants to put forth. And the Democrats have mostly just been sticking to, kind of older neoliberalism based policies, which again, I just don't think fit this moment. There's another article from Ben Rhodes, who is the Deputy National Security Advisor under President Barack Obama. These are both from the New York Times. I don't know if I said that. He says that in the West, neoliberalism, the blend of free trade, deregulation, and deference to financial markets hollowed out communities while enriching a global oligarchy. And it goes on to continue kind of the failures of neoliberalism, and how social media has offered a vehicle to spread grievance and conspiracy theories, allowing populist leaders to radicalize their followers, which is what we have seen. He also continues that the Democrats should merge their commitment to the moral, social, and demographic necessity of an inclusive America with a populist critique of the system that Trump now runs. I agree with this. Democrats need to be more populist on economic policies going forward. I think that this better answers many of the qualms that people have with the current system, and why people are so upset stems from economic insecurity, and just that people feel like they're being screwed over in favor of large corporations and big money interests. And this needs to change. Democrats really need to change the narrative as soon as possible. And I said earlier that Trump represents a shift away from neoliberalism, and there's multiple reasons why. You can look at trade. The neoliberalism policy is free trade, but obviously he's abandoning that kind of philosophy with his institution of tariffs. Immigration, free trade often entails more free immigration policies, lax immigration, the movement of people across borders, but he's taken a very anti-immigration stance. Industrial policy, he's open to intervention, mainly through tariffs, to revive certain industries in America. He is kind of undermining global institutions that have dominated the neoliberal world order with skepticism, withdrawing from the World Health Organization. Fiscal policy, even though he likes to talk a lot about deficit reduction, he has expanded the debt more than Biden. Trump has expanded the debt so much, and so there's less emphasis on that. He is also politicizing certain institutions that used to be considered off base, like the Federal Reserve. He's starting to politicize. And again, also with foreign policy, he's criticizing Europe and our allies like Canada, which is a massive break from the foreign policy that dominated America for decades. And again, both parties kind of agreed on these sets of things before. Both Republican and Democrats agreed on allying with Europe and being close to Europe and being close to Canada and free trade, all of these things. But Trump has represented a shift, and he was the first one to really capture people's anger with the current order and hunger for a change, which Democrats need to replicate in their own way. And so, what is the Democratic vision for the future political paradigm? It's not very clear as of now. There has been some very small shifts, which it's even arguable if it represents a shift even in a whole paradigm, if it's just a political moment. But we have seen some Democrats start to push back on certain elements of cancel culture. You have seen some mainstream Democrats start to embrace more populist messaging, although there definitely has not been a full embrace of it yet within the party. But you have seen some, like Senator Chris Murphy has been the most explicit, who I would have considered until recently a more normie Dem, has started to really embrace, populist kind of policies, almost like Bernie Sanders, which has been interesting. But we are seeing some of these shifts begin to happen, but they haven't been anything major. Recently, though, just within the past couple weeks, there has been a lot of discourse on the book by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson, Abundance. And I think this does provide a window into what the future could look like, or at least an aspect of what a future political paradigm coming from the left could be. And in this book, I'm just going to summarize some of the main points that kind of argue for a politics of abundance and emphasize the need for building and innovation to create a more prosperous and equitable society. And a couple key concepts are they talk about how a lot of policies that we have had kind of during the neoliberal order have stifled development and innovation, such as stringent zoning laws and environmental policies. And this has contributed to housing crises and the inability to create new public transit systems, such as the high-speed rail project in California. That should have been done already. The project has been delayed. It has not been happening. And it's because of these strict zoning laws and just it's so hard to build. It's so hard to do these things. It's so hard to change. It's with kind of the policy order that we have implemented. And this is why housing prices are way up, is because we don't build them. This is why so many people are homeless, is because housing prices are up and they can't afford housing. Like, people are struggling and we refuse to like fully meet the moment. And I agree with this. And I began to say earlier, like the California high-speed rail project, that should have already been done. It's a brilliant idea. We need tons of high-speed rail in this country. I think to keep up in the 21st century. You see that China, if you look at them, they've built like I don't know exactly, hundreds to thousands of miles of high-speed rail just in the past 10, 20 years. Meanwhile, we've barely done anything. We're letting the rest of the world outpace us. We're letting ourselves fall behind. We've tied our hands behind our back. We need to allow ourselves to build housing, to build public transport, to build new public service buildings and infrastructure. So I fully agree with these aspects of abundance, without getting into the nitty-gritty details of abundance, because there are some critiques of how they say we get there, like reliance on the free market and stuff of that nature. But I think the overall vision of abundance and kind of the main argument, again, without getting too into the weeds, I think I agree with that. And I think it's something that Democrats should take to heart. But just that alone, I don't think will help ease a lot of the concerns that people have with our current political system. Which brings me back to Professor Allen and her book, Justice by Means of Democracy. And she says that we need to work towards egalitarian, participatory, constitutional democracy. And so basically, she argues that democracy isn't just about voting and majority rule. It's about creating the conditions for equal participation by all members of society. and that justice is achieved through the democratic process, not outside it. And so some key features are that it needs to be egalitarian, and addresses economic inequalities, racial and social disparities, access to education and civic knowledge, and it needs to be participatory in that it's not just about periodic voting, it's about everyday participation in deliberation, civic engagement, institution building, and community decision making. And it's making sure that people have a voice in politics, power in shaping the laws and norms, and civic education to be effective contributors to society. Because right now, I feel like a lot of people don't feel like they have a true voice in politics. I think this is part of the reason why people are frustrated. I think the system has created a situation where, yes, people can speak stuff out into the world, but what impact does it really have? Um, and so I feel like a lot of people feel very powerless, and this is why you see Congress with like a 15% approval rating, and all of these art institutions with such low approval ratings. So I really like her thinking on this, and that we need to kind of reimagine how we view our democratic processes. And one kind of specific electoral reform she talked about in one of her classes is she highlighted the Alaskan ranked choice voting model, um, which kind of solves some issues and how we elect our representatives. Which the problem with the current system is a very small percentage of the population chooses a party nominee in a primary, and then they go into an election to compete in a district which isn't competitive due to gerrymandering or other factors. Um, and so kind of a top four election model gives more room for compromise. It allows people outside the two-party system to get elected. It's easier for them to get elected. It requires big tent coalitions. She cited an example, I believe, of Senator Murkowski in Alaska talking about after ranked choice was implemented, she started going to Dem doors for the first time to secure their second place votes, which is something she didn't used to do. So it's a Republican going and actually talking to Democrats for the first time in their career, you know. Um, this is just one answer or one specific policy area that uh, we could do to kind of improve how people feel that their voices are heard in democracy and create a more participatory democracy that is more reflective of the population. I think there are other things that we could do as well, um, which I want to go into more in different videos. Um, but we do really need to be radically rethinking this moment. And I just worry that Dem leaders right now just haven't caught on. I don't really understand. I don't think they get the moment we're in. And I don't think Trump fully. I don't. I don't think he fully understood like that his policies how resonant they would be, or why they would be resonant, but they have been, and the left has been offering no alternative except for, tinkering around the edges with the status quo in a system that has screwed people over, where we have seen an exacerbated wealth inequality, climate crisis, all of these issues. We've seen the hollowing out of the middle class, the hollowing out of unions, of the power of the middle class and the working class in this country during this time. And the Republicans have offered an alternative. While I will fervently disagree with it, I think it doesn't help change the issues that we face as a country. And in fact, many of the policies I think will exacerbate the issues we face. But people are so upset with the current system that they were willing to look towards and vote for the only party offering something tangibly or noticeably different from the status quo, which is why Democrats lost in 2024. So until Democrats realize this, it's going to continue to happen. Um, but what we will see again, as I said earlier, is that this shift of paradigms is happening now, but it's going to continue to play out, perhaps for even another decade, perhaps even more. And like I said, that is a lifetime of politics. So much will change. So much has changed from 2015 in politics. So imagine what it will be like in 2035. Um, Democrats have a lot of time to kind of get their footing. There is a lot of time for the Republican Party to change as well, especially post Trump. Also, there are technologies, specifically AI, which could revolutionize our society and have profound implications on politics and kind of how we structure our economy and how the policies of our government reflect that. So this will be a continual conversation going forward. This again is kind of part of the reason, the fundamental reason why I started this channel is because of this. Is like we are undergoing this shift, and it's important to understand that it's happening. And it's also important to realize again that this is a ripe moment for making change, for shaping what the future paradigm looks like. And so I think that this is exciting, and it's something that we should all be participating in and open to, because it doesn't have to be doom and gloom. We do have the ability to offer an alternative for this country, which uplifts everyone instead of a few. Um, but yeah, that's essentially all I wanted to talk about today. I would love to talk with you all in the comments about the political paradigm going forward and what you think it could look like, or other policies that you think could dominate the new political paradigm, or policies that Democrats should be looking towards going into the future. So, again, thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you again next week.